This is my true story. I spent my life raising my daughter, paying for her education, her wedding, and even her first home. I thought when she had a baby, it would bring us closer. But the day I finally got to meet my grandchild, she looked me in the eye and said, "Don't touch my baby. You are disgusting." My heart broke that moment, but I didn't yell. I didn't argue. I just smiled faintly, went home, and made one phone call that changed everything. Before I tell you what I did next, tell me where you're watching from. And please subscribe so my story can reach more people like me. From the day my daughter was born, I made a promise to myself. She would never go without the things I didn't have growing up. I grew up in a house where money was always short, where "we can't afford it" was the answer to everything. My parents did their best, but I had to work from a young age to help keep food on the table. When I held my baby girl for the first time, tiny and pink in that hospital blanket, I swore I'd give her the life I never had, full of security, opportunity, and love. I worked hard every single day for her future. I took overtime whenever it was available. I gave up hobbies and vacations so I could put more money into her education fund. I didn't buy a new car until the old one had completely fallen apart. Every big decision I made, buying a house in a safe neighborhood, saving instead of spending, investing in a business, had one goal: making sure she had a foundation to build on when she was grown. When she was little, I was there for every school play, every sports game, every parent-teacher meeting. I helped her with homework at the kitchen table. I made sure she always had what she needed, whether it was a new dress for prom or extra tutoring before exams. I pushed her to aim high, not to settle for less than she was capable of. And when she told me she wanted to go to college, I was proud beyond words. I paid every cent of her tuition and living expenses so she could focus completely on her studies without worrying about money. When she graduated, I was the loudest one cheering in the audience. I thought about all the long nights I had worked, all the times I had gone without so she could have more, and I told myself it was all worth it. I wanted her to feel supported in every chapter of her life. Not long after, she met the man who would become her husband. I welcomed him into the family with open arms. I paid for most of the wedding, covering the venue, the catering, and even the honeymoon. I wanted her to start her married life without financial strain. When they were ready to buy their first home, I helped with the down payment. I told myself this was what a father was supposed to do: set his children up for a strong future. So when she called me one afternoon with excitement in her voice and told me she was pregnant, I felt like my heart could burst. I had been waiting for that moment for years. I had dreamed of becoming a grandfather, of holding a small, warm bundle in my arms and seeing a new generation of our family in that tiny face. I wanted to be there for every milestone: first steps, first words, birthdays. From that day on, I started preparing in my own way. I visited baby stores and bought soft blankets, tiny clothes, and a few toys I thought my grandchild would love. I put together a small savings account just for the baby's future, for their education, for anything they might need growing up. It wasn't about spoiling them. It was about showing from the very start that Grandpa was someone they could always count on. Every time I passed a shop window with something cute for a baby, I would stop and look. I imagined the day I'd hand my daughter a little gift bag, watch her smile, and then hold my grandchild for the first time. I imagined rocking them to sleep in my arms, telling them stories the way I once told her. I wasn't just thinking about the baby. I was thinking about how this could bring us all closer together. Families grow stronger with each new member. I thought we'd share Sunday dinners, trips to the park, holidays where the baby's laughter would fill the room. I believed this was the start of a new chapter for us, one where my role would shift from father to grandfather, the wise, steady presence in the background, always there to help. I also thought about the fact that time isn't promised. I'm not a young man anymore. I don't know how many years I'll get to watch my grandchild grow. That made the idea of meeting them, holding them, and being part of their life feel even more precious. I wanted to make memories while I could, so they'd always know how much I loved them. In my mind, there was never a doubt. Of course, my daughter would want me to be part of her child's life. We had shared so much. I had been there for every major moment in her life. Surely, this next moment would be no different. I had earned that place in the family through years of care and sacrifice. In the weeks leading up to the due date, I called her often to check in. I offered to drive her to appointments, to help with groceries, to be there for anything she needed. Sometimes she seemed a little distracted, but I assumed it was just the stress of preparing for a baby. I didn't take it personally. I thought once the baby arrived, all the small gaps in communication would disappear. The day she gave birth, I sent flowers to the hospital and a card that said, "I can't wait to meet my grandchild. Love, Dad." She sent a short text back. "Thanks." I told myself she must be exhausted and that it wasn't the time to expect much conversation. I waited patiently for an invitation, for the moment when she would say, "Come meet your grandchild." I believed that when that moment came, it would be warm and full of joy. I had no idea that what was waiting for me instead would change everything I thought I knew about my daughter and about my place in her life. The first time I noticed something was off, it was only a week after the baby was born. I called to see how they were doing, expecting to hear a happy, tired voice on the other end. Instead, my daughter answered with a flat tone and said she couldn't talk because the baby's sleeping. I understood. Newborns take a lot of care, and I didn't want to disturb her. I told her I'd call another time. A few days later, I called again in the afternoon. This time, she said she was too busy and would call me back. She didn't. I waited a day, then two, but the call never came. I told myself she must be overwhelmed, adjusting to the new routine. I tried to be patient. Weeks passed, and each time I reached out, there was a new reason why I couldn't visit. "We're still settling in. The baby's fussy today. We're just not ready for visitors yet." I had friends whose children had babies around the same time, and they were posting photos online of grandparents holding the newborns in the hospital, smiling from ear to ear. I told myself every family is different, and maybe she just wanted more privacy. Still, something didn't feel right. I started noticing other changes too. When she did answer the phone, the conversations were short and awkward. She never asked about me, my health, or how I was doing. It was all surface level, as if we were strangers making polite small talk. The warmth I remembered between us was missing. I tried to bring it back, talking about memories from when she was little, but she didn't respond much. I thought maybe her husband had something to do with it. He'd always been polite to me, but never close. Sometimes during calls, I could hear him in the background, and it felt like the energy shifted. I didn't want to jump to conclusions, but it was hard to shake the feeling that maybe he didn't want me around much. After about 2 months, I decided I needed to see them in person. I called and offered to bring over some groceries and the baby clothes I'd bought months earlier. She paused before answering, and then said they were too busy this week. I asked if the next week would be better. She hesitated again, then finally said she'd let me know. I hung up the phone that day with a knot in my stomach. It wasn't just about not meeting my grandchild yet. It was the feeling that I was being kept at a distance on purpose. I thought about all the years I had been there for her, all the sacrifices I had made so she could have the life she has now. The thought that she might not want me around my own grandchild was something I didn't want to believe. Still, I tried to give her the benefit of the doubt. I told myself it could be postpartum stress, exhaustion, or maybe even a little anxiety about letting people around the baby. I stayed patient, kept my tone gentle, and told her I'd be ready whenever she felt comfortable. Then one day, out of the blue, she called me. Her voice was lighter than it had been in months. She said, "Dad, you can come by next week to see the baby." My heart jumped. I didn't ask why it had taken so long. I just said thank you and marked the date on my calendar. For the next several days, I thought about nothing else. I went to the store and bought a soft blanket I thought the baby would like, along with a few small toys. I put everything in a gift bag and set it by the door so I wouldn't forget it. I pictured myself walking in, seeing my grandchild for the first time, holding them close. I thought maybe this visit would be the start of us being closer again. I had no idea that instead of the moment I'd been waiting for, I was walking straight into the moment that would change everything between us forever. The day finally came. I woke up early, too early, because I couldn't stop thinking about it. I made coffee but barely touched it. I kept looking at the clock, counting the hours until I could leave. I dressed carefully, choosing a clean shirt and the nice sweater my daughter once bought me for Father's Day. I wanted to look my best for my first meeting with my grandchild. I left the house with the gift bag in my hand, my heart pounding with excitement. The drive over felt longer than usual. Every stoplight felt like it was holding me back from a moment I had been waiting months to experience. When I pulled up to her house, I took a deep breath before getting out of the car. I knocked on the door, and she answered after a few seconds. She didn't smile. She didn't look particularly happy to see me, but I told myself she was just tired. I stepped inside and looked around for the baby. My eyes found the small bassinet in the living room, and my heart jumped again. I walked toward it slowly, smiling. "Where's my little grandchild?" I asked softly, my voice lighter than it had been in years. She reached into the bassinet and picked up the baby. I took a step forward, holding my arms out gently. I wasn't rushing. I wasn't demanding. I just wanted to hold them for a moment, to feel their little weight and warmth. But as I stepped closer, she stepped back. Her eyes narrowed slightly, and then, in a voice loud enough to cut through the room, she said, "Don't touch my baby. You are disgusting." It was like the words didn't register at first. My arms froze halfway out. My brain tried to process what I had just heard. I thought maybe I had misunderstood. But no, she was looking right at me, her face hard, her voice sharp. She meant every word. The air in the room felt heavier. Her husband was standing by the kitchen counter. He didn't say a word. He didn't defend me. He didn't even look at me. He just stayed still, letting the words hang there like a judgment I hadn't been prepared to face. I could feel the sting in my chest, not just from the insult, but from the shock of it coming from my own daughter. I had pictured this day so differently. The warmth, the smiles, the shared joy of a new life in the family. Instead, I stood there like an unwelcome stranger, my arms hanging in the air for a moment before I slowly lowered them. I didn't ask why. I didn't argue. I didn't want to make a scene in front of the baby. I simply set the gift bag down quietly on the coffee table, forcing a faint smile onto my face so no one would see how deep the cut had gone. My hands felt empty, my throat tight, but I nodded slightly, as if to say, "All right," and took a step back. No one stopped me as I turned toward the door. No one asked me to stay for tea, to sit and talk, to try again later. I walked out without a goodbye, the cool air outside hitting my face like a second shock. The drive home felt longer than the drive there. The whole way, her words echoed in my head. "You are disgusting." Each time I replayed them, the tone was sharper, the meaning heavier. This wasn't just keeping me from holding my grandchild. This was her telling me I didn't belong in their life at all. I didn't know it yet, but that moment was the exact point where my love for her stopped being unconditional. When I got into my car, I didn't start the engine right away. I just sat there, staring at the steering wheel, my hands resting in my lap. My arms still felt awkward, like they were stuck in that half-out position I'd held before she stepped back. I could still hear her voice, sharp, cold, and loud enough that even the neighbors could have heard it if their windows were open. "Don't touch my baby. You are disgusting." I had been insulted in my life before. I'd been yelled at by bosses, argued with strangers, even had fights with friends. But nothing compared to hearing those words from my own daughter. It wasn't just the insult. It was where it happened, how it happened, and the fact that there were other people there who let it happen. Her husband's silence stung almost as much as her words. He had been standing there, watching it happen, and didn't even try to stop it or soften the blow. It made me wonder if this had been a conversation they'd had before I arrived. Maybe they had agreed on it. Maybe it wasn't just something she blurted out in the moment. The thought made my chest feel heavy. I looked at the gift bag sitting on the passenger seat. I had picked each item inside with care: the blanket, the toys, the little baby socks. Now those things felt like nothing. I had left them there because I couldn't bear to take them back, but part of me wished I had. Part of me wished I had taken everything, turned around and said, "If I'm so disgusting, you can buy your own gifts." But that's not who I am. I've never been the kind of man to make a scene, especially not in front of a child. Even if that child was too young to remember, I didn't want my first and only interaction with my grandchild to be filled with anger. So instead, I smiled faintly, walked out, and let the pain follow me silently to my car. I sat there for almost an hour. Cars passed by, people walked down the street, life kept going like nothing had happened. But for me, something had ended. A line had been crossed, and I knew it could never be undone. I thought about all the years I had worked for her future. The tuition payments, the wedding expenses, the help with her first home. I thought about the nights I came home too tired to eat, the weekends I gave up so I could earn more for her. I thought about how proud I had been when she told me she was pregnant, how I had imagined this first meeting as one of the happiest days of my life. Instead, it had been one of the most humiliating. It wasn't just that she wouldn't let me hold my grandchild. It was the way she said it, the venom in her tone, the finality of it. As if I was dirty, as if I was some danger to her child, as if I wasn't the man who had given her everything she had. By the time I started the engine, the hurt had started to change into something else. Not anger exactly, more like clarity. A kind of cold, sharp understanding that love does not mean letting yourself be treated like you're nothing. I had spent my whole life giving to her without ever asking for much in return. And now I saw what that had earned me. A place in her eyes lower than a stranger's. I drove home without the radio on. I didn't want noise. I wanted the silence to remind me of what I had just learned, that some people will take everything you give and still find a way to look down on you. By the time I pulled into my driveway, I had already decided one thing. I wasn't going to let this go unanswered. When I got inside my house, I didn't take off my coat right away. I just sat down in my chair and stared at the floor. The room was quiet, except for the faint ticking of the clock on the wall. That sound used to be comforting. It meant home, peace, routine. But that day, it only reminded me of how much time I had wasted believing my daughter would always respect me. I replayed the scene in my head again and again. The way she stepped back with the baby, like I was some kind of threat. The way her voice cut through the room without hesitation. The way her husband just stood there, letting the words sink in without a word of defense. It wasn't just a moment of rudeness. It was something deeper. It was a statement, a message. She wanted me to know exactly where I stood in her life. Outside, at a distance, unwelcome. I thought about the decades I had spent providing for her, paying for her schooling so she could graduate debt-free, covering the cost of her wedding so she could have the celebration she wanted, helping her buy her first home so she wouldn't have to struggle. I didn't do those things because I expected repayment in money. I did them because I thought it would build a relationship of love, gratitude, and mutual respect. But what I got in return was none of those things. What I got was a public insult, a moment designed to make me feel small. And it worked for a few hours. I felt smaller than I had ever felt in my life. But as I sat there in that chair, something inside me started to shift. I realized I had made a mistake. I had assumed that blood alone meant loyalty, that being a father meant my sacrifices would be remembered and valued, that no matter what, she would see me as someone worth kindness. That was my fault. I had given too much without setting boundaries. I had taught her that I would always be there, no matter how I was treated. And now, I saw where that lesson had led. She felt safe treating me like nothing because she believed I would never do anything about it. That was when I understood love without respect is worthless. It's just an open door for more pain. I told myself right then, I can't make her respect me, but I can stop giving her the power to humiliate me again. I can stop rewarding her behavior with the benefits of my life's work. That thought led to another, colder one. My will. I had worked for decades to build what I have, my home, my savings, my investments. And in that will, she was set to inherit the majority of it. She had no idea how much. She probably assumed she would one day have everything I own. That assumption gave her a sense of security, the same kind I had taken away from myself by depending on her respect. If she saw me as disgusting, if she thought I was unworthy of holding my own grandchild, then she was unworthy of holding my legacy. I sat there for another hour, thinking it through. I knew it wasn't a decision I could make out of pure anger, but the more I thought about it, the more it felt right. This wasn't revenge for the sake of hurting her. This was about making sure my life's work went to people or causes that would value it, that would respect what it took to build. By the time I stood up, I had made my decision. The next step would be a phone call. Not to her, to my lawyer. That night, after hours of sitting with my thoughts, I picked up the phone and called my lawyer. It was late, but I knew he would see my number and answer. We had worked together for years, and he understood that if I was calling after dark, it was serious. He answered with a calm, steady voice. "Evening, is everything all right?" I told him, "I need to make changes to my will, urgently." I didn't go into detail right away. I just said it was a personal matter and that I wanted to schedule a meeting as soon as possible. He offered to see me the next afternoon. I agreed without hesitation. When I hung up, I felt something I hadn't felt all day. Control. I couldn't control what my daughter thought of me. I couldn't control the words she had spoken. But I could control what happened to the things I had built. That night, I didn't sleep much, but it wasn't from pain anymore. It was from planning. I lay there thinking about who, or what, should get the things my daughter would no longer receive. I thought about the small charities I had supported over the years, the local youth center that had helped dozens of kids stay out of trouble, the animal shelter that was always struggling for funding. I thought about my sister's children, who had always treated me with kindness and respect. These were people and causes that would appreciate every penny and understand the work behind it. By the time the sun came up, my decision was final. The next afternoon, I arrived at my lawyer's office right on time. He greeted me, and after a few minutes of small talk, we sat down at his large oak desk. I looked him straight in the eye and said, "I want to remove my daughter from my will entirely. Not a cent, not a property, nothing." He didn't flinch. He had seen enough family disputes in his career to know this wasn't about a petty fight. But he did ask, "Are you certain? This is permanent once we finalize it." I said, "I've never been more certain about anything in my life." He nodded and began pulling out the necessary documents. We reviewed the current will line by line. Her name appeared in the largest sections: the house, the savings accounts, the investments. Every place her name appeared, I told him to remove it and replace it with the beneficiaries I had chosen: the charities, my sister's children, and a small fund for the community projects I believed in. The more changes we made, the lighter I felt. Each time her name came off the page, it was like another weight lifting from my shoulders. My lawyer made notes for the formal draft and assured me it could be ready for signing within the week. Before I left, he looked at me again and said, "Once this is signed, it's locked in. Even if she comes back tomorrow with apologies, the process to put her back in would take a whole new will." "Are you prepared for that?" I said, "If she ever comes back, it will be for money, not for me. And I won't be here to watch her try." I walked out of that office with a calm I hadn't felt in years. The decision was made. All that was left was to make it legal. A week later, I went back to my lawyer's office to finish what I had started. The weather was clear, the kind of quiet day where the air feels still. It matched my mood perfectly, calm, steady, certain. I carried no hesitation with me. By now, I had spent 7 days thinking it over, running every possible doubt through my mind, and every time, the answer was the same. She would not inherit a single thing from me. When I walked in, my lawyer already had the papers ready. A fresh draft of my will lay neatly on his desk, each section marked with colored tabs where I needed to sign or initial. He greeted me politely, but I could tell he understood there was no small talk needed today. He went through the document line by line again, reading aloud each change. Her name had been completely erased, where her name used to be beside the largest assets, my house, my investments, my savings. There were now new names and causes. The local youth center would get a significant share. The animal shelter I had supported quietly for years would finally have enough to expand. My sister's children, who had always treated me like more than just the uncle with money, would have a fair portion each. Each time he read a section and I signed it, I felt more in control. This wasn't an act of bitterness. It was a correction. It was me making sure that everything I had worked for went somewhere it would be respected. When we reached the final page, he paused. "Once you sign this last one, it's official. And I've included clauses that make it extremely difficult for anyone to contest this in court. It will stand exactly as written." I picked up the pen and signed without even blinking. The pen glided over the paper smoothly, and when I lifted it, I felt something leave me. The last tie that connected her entitlement to my life's work. He gathered the papers, placed them in a folder, and stamped them with the official seal. The sound of that seal pressing into the paper felt final. He looked at me and said, "It's done." I leaned back in my chair and took a slow breath. "Good," I said. "That's exactly how I want it." Before I left, he gave me certified copies to keep for my own records and told me the original would be stored securely. We shook hands, and he said one last time, "You seem very at peace with this." I told him the truth. Because I am. This isn't revenge. This is me putting my life's work where it belongs. When I stepped outside, the afternoon sun was warm on my face. For the first time since that day in my daughter's living room, I felt light. The decision was made. The change was permanent, and no matter what happened next, she would never again have the power to humiliate me and still benefit from my work. After leaving my lawyer's office, I didn't feel the need to tell my daughter anything. I didn't want a scene, an argument, or a stream of excuses. I didn't want to give her the satisfaction of thinking this was a decision she could talk me out of. She had already shown me what she thought of me, and now I was showing her what I thought of that. So I went silent. I stopped calling. No more check-in messages. No more offers to visit. If she wanted contact, she would have to be the one to reach out. I didn't block her number, but I kept my phone on silent when I saw her name pop up. If she sent a text, I replied with short, polite answers, nothing more than what was necessary. If she asked a question, I gave a simple yes or no. No warmth, no conversation. I also stopped sending her small financial help. In the past, if she hinted at being short on money, I'd quietly cover a bill or send a little extra for the baby. That stopped completely. I wasn't going to fund someone who saw me as disgusting and unworthy of even holding my grandchild. I knew it wouldn't take her long to notice the change. The first few weeks, she barely seemed to care. Or at least, she pretended not to. If she did reach out, it was surface level. "Hope you're doing okay," or "The baby's fine." But eventually, her tone started to shift. She began asking if I could help with certain expenses, small at first, then bigger. I gave her the same answer every time. "I'm not able to." Nothing more, nothing less. I didn't explain. I didn't remind her of what she had said that day. I didn't give her a chance to twist the story or paint herself as the victim. I wanted her to sit with the confusion, to wonder why the father who had always been there for her suddenly wasn't. The truth was, I didn't owe her any explanation. She had made her choice that day in the living room when she stepped back with her baby and called me disgusting. That moment had been her statement. My silence now was mine. Months passed like this. I filled my days with other things, friends, community work, hobbies I had put aside for years. I kept myself busy and happy without her presence, and the more time passed, the less I missed the version of her I had thought still existed. Then one afternoon, she called with a tone I hadn't heard in years: urgency. She said she needed to talk about future planning and the will. She had assumed she was still the main beneficiary, still in line to receive everything. She didn't know that had changed months ago. I kept my voice calm. "We'll talk about that when the time comes," I said, and ended the call. I could tell she didn't like that answer, but I wasn't going to hand her the truth just yet. Some things are more powerful when they're discovered, not announced. It happened almost exactly 6 months after I had changed my will. I was sitting on my porch, drinking tea and reading the paper, when my phone lit up with her name. I didn't answer. I had learned that her calls usually came when she wanted something, not because she truly cared how I was. Moments later, a message came through. "We need to talk. Call me ASAP." I ignored it. An hour later, the phone rang again. This time I picked up, mostly out of curiosity. The moment I said hello, she launched into it without so much as a greeting. Her voice was sharp, panicked, and higher than usual. "Dad, why is Uncle Robert telling people you changed your will?" she demanded. There it was. Someone else had finally told her. Robert was my younger brother and one of the few people I trusted enough to know about the change. Apparently, word had slipped during a family gathering she hadn't attended. I could picture the moment, her face turning pale, the way her voice must have cracked as she asked him to repeat it. I didn't rush to answer. I let the silence stretch for a moment because I knew she hated that. Finally, I said, "Because I did." She exploded. "What do you mean you did? You can't just erase me from your will." "I can," I replied, my voice steady. "And I did." There was a pause, and then her tone shifted, part anger, part desperation. "Why? What did I do that was so bad you'd cut your own daughter out?" I almost laughed at the question, not because it was funny, but because the answer was so obvious. "Do you really not remember?" I asked. She hesitated, then said, "No, I don't." I took a deep breath. "The day you told me not to touch my grandchild, the day you looked at me, your own father, and called me disgusting. That's the day." She tried to backpedal. "Dad, I didn't mean it like that." "Yes, you did," I cut in. "You meant every word, and now I mean mine." She went quiet again, but I could hear her breathing, quick, uneven. Then she tried a different tactic. "Okay, maybe I overreacted that day, but you can't take away my inheritance over one mistake. That's not fair." "It's not a mistake when it shows me who you really are," I said. "You didn't want me touching your baby. Now you won't touch my legacy." The silence on the other end told me the weight of those words had landed. She finally said, "You can't do this to me." "I already have," I replied, and then I hung up. I sat there for a long time afterward, feeling something I hadn't felt in years: peace. She had taken enough from me already. This time, I was the one who had taken something back. After that call, she didn't contact me for weeks. The silence was almost strange at first, like walking into a room where a clock had been ticking your whole life, and suddenly it's gone. No more late-night calls asking for a little help until next month. No more guilt-laced messages about how family should be there for each other, by which she meant me being there for her, not the other way around. For the first time in years, my phone stayed quiet, and my mind stayed still. I decided I wasn't going to waste what time I had left replaying her words or wondering why she'd turned into someone I barely recognized. Instead, I made a choice. I was going to live for myself. I had spent decades living for other people, First for my parents, then for my wife and daughter, and even after retirement, for anyone who needed something I could give. But I had reached a point where giving had turned into bleeding, and she had been the one holding the knife without even realizing it. So I started small. I took my mornings back. I began waking up early, making coffee just the way I liked it, and sitting on the porch to watch the sun climb over the horizon. No one rushing me, no one criticizing my habits. Some days I'd just sit in silence. Other days I'd read or listen to old records. Then I started volunteering at the community center. There was a group of kids who came there after school, most from families that had very little. I began teaching them simple woodworking, nothing fancy, just basic skills to make something with their own hands. The way their eyes lit up when they saw a finished project reminded me of the joy I used to feel before life got tangled in bitterness. I also started putting my money where it mattered. The funds that once would have gone to my daughter's inheritance now went to charities that fed people, sheltered the homeless, and provided scholarships to kids who would otherwise never get a shot at college. I wrote the checks with a steady hand, knowing that every dollar was doing more good out there than it would have rotting in the hands of someone who didn't respect me. I traveled too. Nothing wild, no luxury cruises or flashy vacations, just quiet places where I could breathe. A fishing village down south where the air smelled like salt and the mornings were cool and still. A mountain cabin where the nights were so quiet you could hear the wind touch the trees. In every place I went, I left a little of my old anger behind. People sometimes ask if I regret cutting her out completely. The truth? Not once. You can love someone and still know they're poison to your peace. You can forgive in your heart without giving them the keys to your home, your wallet, or your future. I stopped hoping she'd change, because hoping for someone else to become who you need them to be is the fastest way to waste a lifetime. I heard through the grapevine that she was still upset about the will, that she called it unfair and vindictive. But I also heard she never told people why it happened. She left out the part about calling her father disgusting in front of others. Maybe she was ashamed. Maybe she just wanted the sympathy without the truth. Either way, I didn't care. Now, when I think about her, it's not with the same burning hurt I felt that day. It's just distant, like a house you moved out of long ago. You remember the walls, the rooms, but you wouldn't want to live there again. I spend my days how I choose, with people who actually value my presence. When I walk into the community center, kids run up to greet me. When I sit at the cafe, the staff knows my order and greets me like family. My life is smaller now in some ways, but it's fuller where it matters. She took away the joy of my first moments as a grandfather, but she didn't take away my ability to be a grandfather figure to others. She tried to shrink my worth to a single insult, but I expanded it into a life that no one can take from me. My final thought on the matter is simple. Respect isn't automatic. It's not given because of blood or family titles. It's earned through how you treat people. And the day she looked me in the eye and called me disgusting, she gave up any claim to my legacy. I've never looked back.